Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research that we've been doing, and I think there's lots of great parallels and connections and synergies. So there it is, community sport in a changing climate, insights from flood-affected Tairāwhiti. Turn this one on. How's that? Kia ora. All right, community sport in a changing climate, insights from flood-affected Tairāwhiti. So I'm not going to need to go over this too much again because Daryl and Stefan did such a good job of placing this hui in the context of what's happened in our region with Cyclone Gabrielle close to 2 years ago. Significant damage, destruction, impacts on community health and well-being. But importantly, as they also mentioned, it's not just Cyclone Gabrielle, often that's the one that gets the most media coverage, but we've had repeated weather events here, as illustrated in a couple of diagrams from the Gisborne District Council. And even this summer was not our usual summer, or what even is a usual summer anymore, but a couple of images from December, January, which really impacted people's holiday time, our tourism. And so this is the context in which we've been doing research. This is the research team with myself, Josie McClutchy at the back there is our project manager and our photographer. We'll talk to that in a minute. The project's also been supported by Associate Professor Dan Hikuroa from Auckland University, Dr. Mihi Namani from the University of Waikato, who's in the room here. Can't see you, Mihi. Oh, there you are. Kia ora, Mihi. And some amazing community researchers, Holly Williams, who was a Mātai Summer intern. You might have seen her at the desk when you came in, as well as Hayley Maxwell and Renee Belazy. So the project started with a focus on how all of these weather events are impacting our rangatahi. The project was titled Youth Wellbeing in Uncertain Times, the Voices of the Rangatahi from Flood-Affected Tairāwhiti. Josie and I had worked on a big Ministry of Health project last year about the impacts of these weather events on community health and well-being. And what we realised is we didn't have enough of that rangatahi voice. It was there but not enough. And so this project really tried to build and do that justice. We were interested to know how climate change related events were impacting young people's experiences and understandings of well-being, physical, social, emotional, spiritual, financial, and their connections to place. So for this project over the last year, we've conducted focus groups with 95 rangatahi across the region, aged 13 to 25. And these are just a couple of quotes from them. One whose house was badly damaged said how it really badly impacted my mental health because it destroyed a lot of my things, my family photos and family history. And it was just really bad cleaning up around the farm, around the garage, around the house as well. The backyard was completely covered in silt. Whenever there's any amount of rain, I can't sleep. They went on then to talk about how it impacted their schooling and their relationships, their friendships. Another said, I feel all the weather events just make Gisborne so run down. It just doesn't feel like a happy place sometimes, like it's so worn down. It's just kind of in the air, it's kind of sick. It's quite depressing. Seeing all the effects of my town and stuff, it really feels depressing. An important theme that also came through quite early on in the research was how these weather events were impacting their physical activity, their leisure time, and their sporting participation. And so we kind of had an offshoot project that was responding to those voices from our rangatahi. So this project was focused on community sport in uncertain times, learnings from sport clubs and organisations from flood-affected Tairāwhiti. This included interviews, focus groups, and photographic co-creation, which we'll talk to soon. It's all around the room here. But this had 45 rangatahi and also 22 coaches, managers, people working in community sports clubs, mostly volunteers and parents who are supporting their rangatahi in sport. So this, we couldn't include everybody. Research is always limited like that. But we had a representation of sports, including rowing, swimming, surf lifesaving, surfing, skateboarding, kayaking, rugby, and wakaama. Here's me doing a focus group with some of the parents, people in the rowing club. And so what I'm going to do with the rest of this time is just give you a few snippets, the initial findings from this project. And I think you'll see lots of synergies with the previous talk. What we heard from our young people is how important the environment is to their participation, but not just their training and their performance, but also their sense of well-being and connection and belonging here in Tairāwhiti. So we heard this in terms of the awa from our rowers, from our kayakers, from our wakaama paddlers. I'll randomly read one of these, but this was a strong theme that came through. One of our wakaama paddlers said, the awa, it's kind of like a part of us, but you just don't want to paddle in a river that's like that, just full of sewage, sticking out branches, big as logs, dead animals. It's so gross. A kayaker said, we never used to paddle in brown water, but it's brown, just brown all the time now, and smells like poo. I just try not to swallow any water or fall in. It's just how it is now. It's the norm. We heard similar things about the beach and the ocean. A surf lifesaver told us, it's actually so dangerous, like with all the sticks in the water. And when they say sticks, often that's logs, big logs. So it's actually dangerous sometimes. And one of our surfers told us, we would go down, check the typical surf spots to see how many logs or whether they were moving, and Mum would stand on the beach log spotting. People probably like to think it's the big ones, but they're pretty obvious. But actually it's the smaller, more thicker, dense ones. Once they come over the falls and smack you in the head, they can be bad as. In Tokomaru, entire fence lines have been dragged into the ocean. So fence posts with nails and all that kind of thing. Even just getting from the car park to the surf spot was just phenomenal, like having to clamber over logs, and then you go to put your foot in and it just kind of sinks down. And it was kind of scary. So these are young people who are passionate about their sports, but it's just hard to keep going. You'll see some of that language. It's gross, it's disgusting. These are places they love and care deeply about. So Clifton Evers is an Australian scholar working in the UK, and he's come up with this concept of polluted leisure. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I think it's a really interesting concept to work with. He describes polluted leisure as describing the embodied, sensorial, emotional, intellectual, spatial, and technological emergence of pollution, material and social, harmful and non-harmful, actual and perceived, assembling with leisure. So when we participate in these sports, when we're immersed in these environments, the ocean, the river, we are feeling that pollution on our feet, as we see here, that water washes over us. And so what I'm hearing from our rangatahi is that polluted sport is significantly affecting their emotional connections that they have to sport, but also the places and the spaces in which they're participating in. You'll hear from in a lot of those quotes, big emotions, kind of disgust, fear. We also heard of anger and frustration. Why is sewage being pumped into the river? They feel very upset about that. And some of our participants talked about really caring for these environments. These events have brought up the importance of care and concern for the environments they love. So a surfer told us, it definitely made me feel like it gave me more of a drive to really figure out what's happening to our environment, like what lives in the sea, how they need to live. And after that, you kind of understand, what are we if the sea's gone or the land's gone? And so I learnt to respect it a lot more. Some of our Wakaama paddlers were upset about the sewage being pumped into the river every time it rains hard. They said, can't they put the sewage anywhere else? Please, they need to hear our voice. We also heard about equipment being damaged. And there was a lot of grief associated with Wakaama being damaged in the river, being found along the beach. The damage in the event, but also the constant damage when the river is full of logs or sticks, and when the silt builds up, it's harder to paddle. Boats are damaged, and then it's the cost of repairing those and the time involved in that. One of our kayakers said, the river is a lot shallower now. At low tide, I'm literally hitting the bottom the whole time with my paddle. It's so hard to paddle. Sometimes we just can't really paddle because it's just so low. And because it's full of silt, it's harder to paddle as well, because you're pulling through mud as well. There's been lots of broken rudders from sticks. They're just everywhere. You see one and you're just like, bang. Facilities were damaged. This is the rowing shed there. See if the video plays. This is the cleanup work. And the young people that we spoke to, they were the ones there who were doing the cleanups. And it's not just once, it's not just after Cyclone Gabrielle, it's repeated. So they want to train in that river. They've got nationals coming up, they've got Māori coming up, but they're also having to get there and shovel out the silt. And so it wasn't just the immediate damage, but also the difficulties of accessing facilities in the months afterwards. So this is a quote here from a rugby team from up the coast. They said, Cyclone Gabrielle affected us hugely. We're a women's team. The majority of our women live here, but some of them live in Gisborne. The roads were closed, so they couldn't train. The fields in Gisborne were that boggy. There was like 2 months when all the fields were closed. I was ringing around everywhere trying to get churches, indoor places, anywhere for them to train. But there's not many places in Gisborne for our town girls to train. So we switched it up and decided because of the weather, we started going to the gym. But then it's the cost of that. Some of our mums have got 2 or 3 kids and it ends up being quite costly. So some of the young people that we spoke to were aspiring athletes, wanting to represent the region on the national stage. Some of them were competing internationally. So all of these disruptions were really affecting their training time and ultimately their performances. One of our swimmers said, we're having big gaps in our program, like having all these missed weeks that add up. It was a bit stressful because the cyclone didn't happen that long before nationals, swimming nationals, and then the kayak nationals are straight after, and having all that cleaning up to do is really not what you want to do. So they're really focused, right? They've got these goals and they're working hard towards them, but it's just hard because we have all these kind of closures and disruptions to their routines. Same with Wakaama, who were training for Worlds. Some talked about how the damage, the destruction in our ocean and our rivers was really affecting their motivation and ultimately their enjoyment of participating. A surfer said, the cyclone really put me off surfing a lot, just the dirty water, not really wanting to get out there. I was like, there's all these logs coming in and lots of fruit as well and rubbish everywhere in the water. I just didn't want to go surfing. It was disgusting. But I pushed through that because I love surfing. We heard that from Wakaama. The weather really affected our motivation, like we couldn't go in the water. It's like, well, what's the point? And a surf lifesaver said something similar. Motivation's just lower because I don't really want to be training in like poo water, brown water. They were very evocative in how they described the water because they spend so much time in it. They know the colour, the smell, the changes. They're observing these environmental changes around them. So they're feeling it very deeply. So a lot of the young people that we spoke to were really passionate and committed to their sports, but they noticed changes in their peer groups. So those who might not have been as focused or committed, they noticed some of them dropping off. So one of our kayakers said with kayaking, it's quite a lot of people dropped off, so now it's just like, it feels lonely sometimes. And they talked about COVID. We've had all this disruption from COVID, so we saw people drop off then, but then also with our sports, water sports and outside sports, it's just no one can be bothered starting because, yeah, it's just so horrible. We heard similar things from Wakaama. Nobody really wants to swim and paddle and poo and mimi water and vomit water. Very visceral words here about the environments that they care about and how it's affecting not only them individually, but also their sporting communities. So the conversations that we had with coaches and volunteers and managers, we heard about they believe deeply in the importance and the power of sport and that kind of the long stages of recovery, and particularly for their young people. But there's a lot more time and effort that goes in to keeping sport going. Whether that's with training, lots of flexibility and lots more comms required, but also rebuilding routines and supporting the motivation and engagement. The organisational labour, the extra work organising and fundraising for trips away that often take longer and are more expensive because of roads. Some of them got some support, but there's a whole lot more kind of unpaid, invisible time and effort that goes on behind the scenes in sports clubs, so much from our volunteers just to keep these options open for our young people. We heard about club volunteers and leaders spending many hours, sometimes hundreds of hours, working on insurance claims, working on writing grant applications, often when they're trying to deal with their own family and work stresses, which are impacted as well. And then also organising events, increasing challenges organising events, sometimes lost income when events are cancelled due to weather-related events, or rivers or oceans beaches being closed. So one of our surf life-saving coaches said the most immediate thing was training, like the day-to-day running of training and patrols. If there's a beach closure, if there's debris, we're working out how that is going to affect us basically, and certainly after the event it was a huge, huge effect. We pretty much didn't get on our beach for weeks afterwards. And then moving on from that, after we'd sort of dealt with, how do we work out training? How do we keep the athletes going? How do we keep our lifeguards engaged? How do we keep our nippers crew engaged? Rather than sort of dropping everything, dropping the whole season, because it was right bang in the middle of the season. So that extra work to get creative, to get innovative, how do we keep these options open? How do we support our sporting communities through all this disruption? And we heard of coaches going above and beyond to support their rangatahi. One of our athletes said, I think our coach, he just sort of motivated us to keep going through it all and just kind of pushed us to keep going. So all of us kept showing up to trainings and we were all keeping ourselves in check. So lots of extra effort from the coaches to keep those young people engaged and involved, even when it was hard. I love to hear our young people aware of the extra mahi their parents were putting in. And they were really aware of that. One of our Wakaama paddlers said it's been hard for our parents just getting us to trainings and just being ready for the changes. Like we had to be ready to get up at 5 to go to a different city to train. But they have to as well. And they're just driving us, and it's not even for them, but they are still helping us wherever they can. And my dad fixes our broken walkers too. Some of them are aware that their parents' jobs have been impacted, so they can't support their sporting participation in the same ways that they might have before. So young people see that effort. They see the parents, they see the coaches, they see the people in the sports clubs that are working hard to keep it going for them. We heard about community sports clubs being really important community hubs As Stefan mentioned before, often we don't think about sport as the first kind of thing that comes to mind after these types of events, but actually they're very important for communities coming back together, helping each other socially, but also financially and physically. One of our rowers talked about how the club captain put out a notice through the club group chat, and then everyone turned up at his house to help shovel silt. One of our surf lifesavers said, I think when you've got a place with that history and that kind of connection to people's lives and importance in people's lives, when you have something like a cyclone, it can be a place to bring everyone together again. The day after the cyclone, everyone came here, unlocked the door, or I came here, unlocked the doors, and within half an hour there were 40 people here. So everyone just migrated here to catch up and find each other. Of course, no one could ring each other, so it was our place to come and find if everyone was okay and who needed help. And then from there, they rallied and got into the community to help out where they could. A powerful quote here, because we have some community sports clubs who recognise the importance of these clubs for people coming together and helping them through these long recovery processes. This is Te Uranga o Te Rā. We've got all the different age groups, and because the ladies get the club ready, then you get all the old people being part of it. So you've got the communities all represented, watching the mana from that. Everyone whakapapas, so it's a place to come together. It's the centre for all our hapu here. One of the strategies that the club has been trying out is having a lot more community events to bring everybody together, to have a good time, to help with some of the anxiety, and to make those reconnections. So through this research, we've heard of the power of sport in a changing climate. Communities of care, caring for each other. The importance of sport, community sport, for recovery and rebuilding, finding focus, hope and connection. From our young people, we've heard of this intimate knowledge of the environment that they're immersed in. They care deeply, and they're seeing these changes and it upsets them. And we've also heard of the networks of support and collaboration through their sporting communities. One of our swimmers talked about how important it was to get to swimming, to get out of the home, all the worries in the home and at school exacerbated through these events. He said, when we could come back to the pool, to training, it's just our happy place. You're just in a different mindset, in a different space. That's not home, that's not school, just somewhere else, a different mindset. One of our skateboarders talking about the importance of informal sport. She said, we just skated down to the school and jammed there for a few hours, and some friends did show up, which was cool as well. Obviously, we all had the same idea, kind of just get your mind off it, get outside, do something that we know is fun and will make us happy. Those social relationships are so important, always important, but even more so after extreme weather events. One of the parents told us, talking about sport, it gives them something to focus on. It gives them something to strive to keep moving forward and amongst all of the weight of devastation and depression and hardship. There's a glimmer of hope that I can work at what I'm good at and I can get through and enjoy it. And yeah, enjoy a life amongst it. From some of our sports clubs, we heard how much they appreciated support from national sports organisations. This was not unanimous, but some sports, like lifesaving and like rowing, felt really well supported from their national sporting communities, whether it was going to an event out of town. There were tents provided. Surf lifesaving, they were told to bring a bag of your laundry and we'll do it when they went over to Mount Maunganui. They found that very emotional. There's a whole lot of support in their sporting communities more widely. People showed up for them. And rowing, we're amazed when Rowing New Zealand turned up with a trailer full of ergs for the young people to train on. That meant a lot to them, that the National Sports Organisation was doing what they could to help out. So some final lessons, learnings and reflections here from the research and from our conversations with sports clubs, community sports clubs. Support from national sports organisations, some of them would like to see more of that. Even just reaching out to connect, how you're doing, is there anything you need, what could we do? We heard of some amazing versions of collaboration across codes that might not have happened before so much, but some sharing of resources and facilities. Some asked for more of that. To get prepared for future events, can we build these connections so that we can support each other? For example, when one swimming pool's closed, can we work together to use another? Can we share the resources that are still available? They talked about sort of variable amounts of dialogue with council about facilities and decisions that impact sports, like roading, sewage overflow, clearing of beaches and waterways. Some people wanted to have more conversations about that because it was really impacting their day-to-day operations. But we also heard about the power of sporting spaces for people to connect with the places that they love. Some of our young people said, if the beaches are going to be constantly covered in logs and the ocean's full of pollution, I don't know if I want to raise my babies here. Actually, they're thinking about leaving. Because it's not just sport, but it's also places that they care about. We heard that our committed participants, with the right support around them from coaches, from sports clubs, from whānau, they can keep going through these disruptions and hardship. But we heard that those who are newer participants or more recreational participants, it's kind of harder to keep them engaged when it's raining all the time, when the water smells like poo or vomit water. How do we keep people motivated and getting involved? Particularly hard for those more recreational novice participants. Importantly, our research was focused on young, able-bodied athletes who are focused, right? But I think it's important to think about inequities here, some of the challenges in accessing and participating in sport and active recreation that might be exacerbated in a changing climate. Our surf lifesavers talked about having to carry their boats all the way down the beach 200 metres and then through a path through the logs. The young woman said, that's harder for us. These boats are heavy. Getting the boats into the river through the deep mud. There are some of the gender inequities. But what about if you're living with a disability or you're an older person, right? So how is this going to impact different people in different ways? So I do think it's really important that we do think about age, gender and disability. That wasn't the focus of our research, but there's definitely more research needed there. So another part of our project, working with young people, was to create or co-create photographs with them. And we have an exhibition in the room today. We launched this last night. It's Out of the Darkness, because we heard from young people that sport was often what got them through some dark times. So we've got 21 photographs in the room that you can explore today. Our amazing photographer, Josie McClutchie, took these photographs, trying to communicate the themes from our research. And you'll see underneath them quotes to evoke these themes from our research. It was wonderful to have our young people joining us last night for the launch, with them standing proudly with their photographs, with their whānau. And hopefully this creates an opportunity for more dialogue and to listen to our rangatahi, because they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of insight. We hope that these images portray their resilient spirit. I think we can learn a lot from them. So this is the exhibition. We are trying to get this mobile, get it moving out across the community. We're trying to look into some funding sources so it can get into schools, it can get into sports clubs, maybe even get into marae if there's interest, so it can facilitate a conversation. We're not trying to represent everyone's experience, but with these photographs and these quotes in the room, we'd love to have young people leading this about what's important to them in a context of a changing climate. So as you get your cup of tea, as you get your coffee and morning tea, do take your time to wander around the exhibition, and we'd love to hear any feedback you may have. And that's it from me, so thank you very much.